for the history of the Neo Geo and how it was a vital part of the gaming console wars. The year was 1990.
3 decades ago, SNK released a legendary upright that launched many long-running video game franchises and helped rejuvenate a dwindling arcade scene. We take a look at why the system and its home counterpart follow-up were so important to a gaming generation. The NEOGEO multi-video system, also known as the NEOGEO MVS, had a low-key arcade profile despite its blaring red and white color scheme. Most 1990s-era arcade machines continued the 1980s tradition of flamboyant cabinet art by featuring their in-game characters in larger-than-life fashion. The NEOGEO MVS didn't do that, and it wasn't due to SNK, the hardware's manufacturer, possessing a subdued, artistic vision. NEOGEO uprights didn't feature explosions, speed lines, or brawling figures as adornments because the hardware's unique design let arcade owners swap new game cartridges into their existing MVS units instead of buying expensive, standalone machines for each title. That imagery was reserved for the relatively small marquee above the CRT monitor. As a result, the NEOGEO's exterior was nothing. Its guts, a beautiful array of classic arcade titles, was everything. That, in a way, also sums up the NEOGEO as a whole, a niche platform that literally changed the game. Now 30 years old, the NEOGEO lies deep in video game history's retro wing. This is a somewhat baffling revelation for people who were in the 1990s arcade scene because the NEOGEO, at its peak, represented the future. Crafted as a powerhouse that could produce magnificent sprites and booming audio in a way that its contemporaries could not. The NEOGEO MVS and its advanced entertainment system home console counterpart that came a year later housed some of the finest video games and pixel art to ever appear in the medium. The future is now the arcade system came out of the gate hot. Many games featured big and numerous sprites bursting with color. Early NEOGEO games such as Baseball Stars Professional, League Bowling, and Ninja Combat look average by today's graphical standards but couldn't be perfectly replicated on their era's 16-bit home systems like the Sega Genesis and Super NES. The sprites were too big, the sound too rich. The NEOGEO lacked a killer app in its early days. Anyone who says Magician Lord, a frustrating platformer, filled that role is dead wrong and not to be trusted, but its growing library managed to attract people who loved the platform's high insights and sounds.
By the time the Neo Geo hit its mid to late 1990s stride, the MUVs and AES some museum-worthy graphical advances that still impress till this day. Art of Fighting 3, Guru, Mark of the Wolves, Last Blade 2, and Metal Slug 3 represent a fusion of meticulously drawn sprites, art direction, and technology that remains unmatched. In fact, it wasn't until the PlayStation 2 era that we saw console systems released after the Neo Geo's prime years capable of properly emulating the big red machine. Sync's company slogan, "The future is now," was less an aspirational goal than a statement of fact. The big Takethis high-end power gave the Neo Geo legendary status and an accompanying infamous price. 1990s arcade kids simply had to pop a quarter into the MUVs upright to enjoy the King of Fighters, but if they wanted to experience the game at home, in uncompromised fashion, they, or more specifically, their parents had to spend heavy coin. The home AES system, essentially a consoleized arcade board that was released a year after its MUVs brother, had a $399 starting price, with game carts starting at $199. Adjusted for inflation, that's more than $750 and $370, respectively. Ridiculous. Still, the AES was for people who refused to suffer the audio or visual downgrades that came with the Super NES and Sega Genesis Neo Geo game ports. In addition, both the AES and MUVs housed memory card ports, so you could use a game's saved data at home or at the arcade. Neo Geo was all Cadillac, no Honda, baby. Neo Memory S naturally. That monster price tag made the Neo Geo a system primarily played at arcades. Very few people own the home AES system. During my high school years, a friend of a friend claimed that he owned an AES system, and to prove it, he brought its massive stick to the arcade one day. Wrapped in a hoodie, I begged and pleaded for the kid whose name is now covered in the cobwebs that cling to old memories to let me play it, and he promptly shot me down. The system was a diamond, and he couldn't risk jewel thieves entering his home. As a result, I and millions of other kids pumped a lot of money into the MUVs machines. It was easy to do, because MUVs machines were everywhere during the 1990s. Thanks to the MUVs multi-game design, many public-facing businesses from bodegas to laundromats to pizza shops became 4-game arcades in a single cabinet's footprint. The arcade was no longer a specific place, it was everywhere. Some argue that was a detrimental move that turned off people interested in other genres, but the shift was one that worked in Senk's favor.
Fight Club. In retrospect, CSE released the Neo Geo at one of the most important moments in video game history. A year after the MUVs hit arcades, and the same year that the AES hit the home market, Capcom's Street Fighter II arrived on the scene to breathe new life into the shrinking arcade scene. Suddenly, legions of gamers flocked to the arcade for heated fighting game competition. Before that moment, CSE and its third-party partners released beat-em-ups, shmups, sports, and action games. After that moment, the company's focus shifted to fighting games. Some argue that was a detrimental move that turned off people interested in other genres, but the shift was one that worked in Senk's favor. While Capcom mainly produced Street Fighter and Marvel Comics-related fighters, CSE went buck wild with experimentation. Its fighting games came in numerous varieties, from the weapon-based Samurai Shodown to the team-based King of Fighters. Street Fighter, along with Mortal Kombat, dominated the 1990s arcade scene, but CSE was right there with them. In fact, many gameplay mechanics that are now considered fighting game staples, such as super attacks, began life in one of the Neo Geo's many fighting game series. The Neo Geo legacy Neo Geo's sunset in 2004 as the arcade scene once again fell on hard times and CSE encountered financial difficulties. The company would enter its dark ages during this period, producing third-party console clunkers like the King of Fighters, Maximum Impact, and Samurai Shodown Sen, but eventually churned the beautiful King of Fighters 13 and the strategic Samurai Shodown reboot. Still, Senk's bread and butter, its Neo Geo library, is what keeps the company's arcade legacy alive in contemporary times. Unlike Konami and a few other companies that had their heydays in the 1980s and 1990 seconds, CSE makes sure that its Neo Geo games, from the famous to the semi-obscure, are available for purchase. You can buy Real Bout Fatal Fury Special on Switch, Big Tournament Golf Aka, Neo Turf Masters on PS4, Riding Hero on Xbox One, and Shock Troopers on PC. Senk's partnership with Digital Eclipse resulted in the marvelous Samurai Shodown Neo Geo Collection, a compilation that includes the 6 Samsho games released on the system, the previously unreleased Samurai Shodown V Perfect, hours of CSE developer interviews, design docs, and other things that video game preservationists love. They say time waits for no man and remains undefeated. The best that anyone can do to approach immortality is to leave behind a strong legacy. That's exactly what CSE accomplished with the Neo Geo, a platform renowned for its arcade games and made infamous by the cost of its home system. Its over-reliance on fighting games meant that it wasn't a system for everyone, but people who didn't mind that people like me find this arcade machine and home console to be indispensable parts of gaming.